Hello, everyone. This is Daniel Jamario, and I'm here with the monthly video blog. And it's my pleasure to be sharing this time with Silvianne, who's going to help out on this. And she also has dived deeply into our topic today. So we should have I think, a very productive conversation. And the purpose of today, maybe you can put up that first slide just for a moment. This is about new information. So I'm calling it Yuga Shift Update. And the focus of today's conversation is on this incredible book called Yuga Shift, which I just was really looking forward to sharing with you about this book. It came out in 2023, and I'm so happy it did. Many of you that have been following this subject for a while know that I have been raving about this guy, Bibhu Dev Mishra, ever since he put out his research on the Yugas, back in 2012 when he had presentations on Graham Hancock's website. And I've been using it quite a lot. And in fact, it went into work I did on the converging timelines, which we're going to revisit again today. But this book updates it and goes into so many other features that will answer certain questions and bring up more. Okay, so the thing that is so great about this book is that it's very much in the flavor of what I like to do in my own research, which is not just to look at one culture, but to have a global view. And he's woven in all kinds of stuff from Greece, from India, from China, from Egypt, from Persia. He's taken and actually even Aboriginal, in Australia. He's woven together many different things in order to, I think, come up with a tremendous solution to the whole issue about the yugas, including that was I just love the fact that his own curiosity matched my own, which is that he couldn't quite figure out how some of the earlier writers talked about a 24,000 year cycle or two 12,000 year cycles, and how that did not necessarily fit in with what we know to be the precessional cycle. But he always had the intuition that they were intended to be the same thing. They were talking about the same cycle that is a natural cycle to um, Earth and space. And I think his research actually confirms his suspicion as well as my own about it. So I've had the opportunity to update that timeline of history kind of thing, but just to make sure that I can remember to cover all the points I wanted to do in this sharing. Um, I want to look at the updated timeline and to talk a little bit about these additions of two 1,200-year time periods. Also, his view, which makes a whole lot of sense to me about what it is that was the cause of the precessional cycle to begin with. Um, we'll also have a discussion about the Taurid meteor shower and what actually might be causing the conflagrations and deluges and these different time periods when everything pretty much changes. Um, and then also we do want to also discuss an issue that's come up in some of our previous conversations about if we're coming out of the Kali Yuga, then is it a very slow ascent back to another golden age, or is there a way in which some people have speculated it goes directly into a Sat Yuga? And so we'll discuss that particular issue based on what comes out in this book. One other thing I want to mention just to get started here is that for the last few years, I have suggested that the best book I've read in years was this one called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber. And I still feel that is just so foundational to understanding who are we and what the heck happened, you know. But this I'm now saying is that I'm suggesting that anyone who's interested in this larger story, that almost say recommended. If you're interested in the cosmology element of our school and what the turning of the ages is and what we can do about it and how we can, you know, navigate and orient ourselves to it, this book is a must. And uh, uh, to take your own inquiry deeper. So you flashed up there, before we go to the converging timelines, go to those other two that you had prepared there. So originally, and this was actually based upon what even people as erudite as Sri Yukteswar, who he talks a lot about in this book, that they were talking about, and this goes throughout history, whether it's Plato, whether it's the Persians, many different sources in this book. They were talking about a 12,000 year cycle, and they put it together to form 24,000. And how does that match 25,820? Well, based on his more recent research, and what we're looking at right here is a schematic of the complete Yuga cycle of 24,000 years, consisting of an ascending and descending half cycle of 12,000 years each. But he's now updated this, and I've also updated my own chart of converging timelines by his discovery of these 1,200-year time periods. And it kind of blew his mind when he discovered the sources of these 1,200-year time periods that match exactly what we know in the geological record as the 1,200-year time frame of the Younger Dryas. And by putting in these additional portions of the ascending and descending Yuga cycle, then it makes sense. It falls together. And so while when we were discussing this before coming on to create this video blog, I heard you, it sounded, Silvianne, like you knew how to pronounce these words. Cataclysmos, is that
Well, that's what
something?
I made up, but it, cataclysmos and ekpyrosis, which
Right.
come from the Greek. So,
And he was discovering this from Persian and Greek sources about this particular understanding of what happens, and he put this into the time frames that would happen right after the difference is that one is called a conflagration, which would be like the world destroyed by fire, and then there would be the one the deluge, which would actually be destroyed by water. Well, what it is that let's go to the converging timelines here, and I want to update a little of this. It turns out, based upon his new research, that the Yuga chart corresponds precisely now. In fact, I forgot to put in a different number here. See the 25,920. It's so interesting that a lot of times that number is bandied about, 25,920. Guy Ottwall has always used 25,800. Bibhu Dev Mishra is able to match it to 25,820. Well, there's something that also stood out to me when I was reading this book, and this is something I had not known, that the distance from our solar system to galactic center is 25,820 light years. And so one of one of the remarkable things that I love about this book and our approach in the school is that the universe is has a fractal nature, as above so below. That which is the smallest is the same that is the which is the largest. And it's beyond the scope of this conversation now, but there's a whole thing called metrology, which is basically the study of measures. And so the original measures for which they built the stone circles and so on was based on the relationship between the moon, the sun, and the earth. So it actually had to do with natural relationships of the strangeness or the uniqueness of the relationship between the sun and the moon and earth. That's beyond the scope here, but I'm just throwing that out here right now, that these things match in a remarkable way. I also wanted to share a couple of new thoughts regarding over there with the processional stars and the five suns. Well, if we look at the Hopi and the Mayans, their view was four suns. The Aztec and the Toltecs had it five suns, but in each of their period time frames, whether you divide 26,000 years by 5 or by 4, you can multiply 6 times 4 worlds and come up with the same thing, or you can multiply 5 times 5 worlds and come up with the same thing. I was emphasizing here on this converging timeline chart. I was emphasizing more of the 5-sun version because, according to the Toltecs, after the 5th, it becomes the 1st again. The 6th would be the same as the 1st. So it's like it's turning over after 5. But I guess you could make the same assumption regarding dividing by 4. Dividing by 4 has it match exactly the 4 seasons of the great year of the astrological ages. So basically you have spring, summer, fall, winter. You have the different turning points. I mean, basically every 6,455 years. Now you can also see it still matches beautifully that when Deneb and the Milky Way pointed north, and Deneb was the North Star, it is corresponding with the time period of the ascending and descending Sat Yuga, the golden age, which corresponds to much of the Central Asian mythos that is where a lot of the knowledge was kept during the Ice Age. Because that area of Asia, Central Asia, was not glaciated, and so that after the conflagration, the conflagration happened at the. You can look at the timeline there. Go back to the ascending Kali Yuga. The ascending Kali Yuga, 26,476 BCE, then is followed by a conflagration. Well, look down to the bottom, and then you have now the ascending Kali Yuga, followed by a conflagration. While if we go back to the ascending, let's see, the descending golden age, or descending, then we have the deluge. And that is what absolutely, completely corresponds with the younger Dryas events of the 1200-year time period. That the thing that's so great of this book is how he goes through these, he finds these documents that probably had not even been, most people hadn't been aware of, that goes through the whole 1200-year time period of 26 different comets that strike the Earth, and the different phases of what the world went through during the time period of the deluge. Flooding, freezing up, kind of like nuclear winter, which would be the phrase that would be used today. But then also that they didn't see every one of those comet strikes as being negative. It also was something that brought new life, and it was actually then responsible for the melting, the final melting, and then the movement ascending, sorry, descending, that it continues to descend after the time period of the cataclysmos, the deluge. So there's a difference really in flavor between the ascending and the descending. While the conflagration would have happened there right after the ascending Kali Yuga, and at the same time here at the end of the ascending Kali Yuga, now that we're just coming out of.
And yeah,
So,
and one thing I really got a better sense of reading it, you know, because I've heard you go over this material the way you had it before, and I couldn't really get like these 2,700-year periods, and then there's a 300-year period of transition, right? But you
yes.
really get the sense of, like you said, in the text, in the ancient texts, describing that, yes, there's always this reset, even when you're ascending, that things need to get destroyed and cleaned out, but it always brings this reseeding of ideas, civilization in kind of a whole new way. So you really had that sense of ascent, even though there's these resets.
Right, and actually, again, it's like I'm going to suggest those of you who love this kind of research to go into his book in greater depth, because he has a lot of information in there regarding the more minor, I guess we could say, although if you're living at that time, it wouldn't be considered minor, the different resets that have happened at the different transitional periods. Like since the deluge, if we go down to the younger Dryas time period, there's then the descending Silver Age and a transitional period, a descending Bronze Age and a transitional period, a descending Kali Iron Age transitional period, and he basically lines that up with other like more located in more specific parts of the world, like the Noah flood, for example, which was something associated more with the Black Sea and in that part of the world. He even describes what he believes to be the mechanism from which how that happened. But there's a lot of emerging records of what had happened in these transitional time periods. And that's certainly suggested for further research and work. In fact, his website includes a lot of that research and what he's discovered regarding that, based on the emerging material coming through from archaeology and anthropology over the last 3,000 or 4,000 years. So we have then in the descending time period, we've been descending now, and including, I should also mention that it gives really remarkable proofs, and it convinces me that actually there was a mistake made in a lot of the original understanding in India, that actually the yugas were intended to be the same length of time, not 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's represented here by what you're looking at right now as we're speaking. The different aspects of the different yugas within the greater entire yuga cycle are intended to be the same length, but it's like two consecutive Kalis and two consecutive Sats. And then you have the intermediate ones, and then you have these new time periods, the conflagration and the deluge. Now, I do want to just spend a moment here before we continue in this inquiry to speak more about the Kali Yuga and what we could expect between the difference between the descending Kali Yuga and the ascending Kali Yuga. By the way, he is pinpointing March 2025 as being the actual ending of the ascending Kali Yuga, and this is something that possibly other members of our school have looked into. I think that actually Emmett knows a fair amount about this. Is that what what this author has done is that he's integrated the Indian understanding of the nakshatras and was able to locate the specific nakshatra of the moon that had started the whole thing. And so that's from that, which is where he came up with March of 2025, because the very same nakshatra, based upon an older system of a 2,700-year cycle, lines up with the other dates. So he's basically suggesting that the very end of the ascending Kali Yuga is March of next year. But before our speculation on what comes next, let us place our attention more on what is the nature of the Kali Yuga, right? So why don't you put up that marvelous little quote you took from the book?
So this is in the book, but it's from the Vishnu Purana, the ancient texts of India. By his irresistible might, he will destroy all the barbarians and thieves and all whose minds are devoted to iniquity. And this is talking about the avatar that's going to come at the end of the Kali Yuga age. He will establish righteousness upon earth, and the minds of those who live at the end of the Kali age shall be awakened and shall be as clear as crystal. The men who are thus changed by virtue of that peculiar time shall be as the seeds of human beings, my emphasis, and shall give birth to a race who will follow the laws of the Krita age or Satya Yuga, the age of purity. And he makes it, again, a very convincing argument that these avatars are actually the comets or whatever that mechanism is that's coming from the cosmos to make these, huge Earth changes.
He also has a whole section in the book about the apocalypse of John. Basically the biblical stuff is also woven into it quite a lot, and he relates that to what he perceives as being the mechanism for the deluges and the conflagrations. Well, I wanted to add to this, actually, it's a portion of this that I've shared before, but I think that it is valuable to hear this again because it's a more elaborate, slightly more elaborated thing, also from the Vishnu Puranas. Please understand, this was a few thousand years ago they wrote this, okay? And so this was this is the quote. The kings of churlish spirit, violent temper, and ever addicted to falsehood and wickedness, they will inflict death on women, children, and cows. Think of what's going on right now. They will seize upon the property of their subjects. They will be of limited power and will be, for the most part, rapidly rise and fall. Their lives will be short, their desires insatiable, and they will display but little piety. Wealth and piety will decrease day by day until the world will be wholly depraved. Then property alone will confer rank. Wealth will be the only source of devotion. Passion will be the sole bond of union between the sexes. Falsehood will be the only means of success in litigation. And women will be objects merely of sexual gratification, sensual gratification. Earth will be venerated, but only for its mineral treasures. Dishonesty will be the universal means of subsistence. Menace and presumption will be substituted for learning. The people, unable to bear the heavy burdens imposed upon them by their avarice sovereigns, will take refuge amongst the valleys of the mountains and will be glad to feed upon wild honey, herbs, roots, fruits, flowers, and leaves. Thus, in the Kali age, shall decay constantly proceed until the human race approaches its annihilation. Well, I've elaborated on that many times, and another way to put it, including the work of Steiner and others, that what happens during this age is the increase of materialism and the disconnect from spirit and soul. But it's also recognized here that at this time period, it's much more people who are awake. There's far greater chance of using your spiritual will to access the heart, righteousness, piety, mercy, things like that. Because before in Asat Yuga, everyone had it, so it was no big deal. While at this time period, those of a spiritual orientation are called upon using the spiritual will to access that which will then be creating the ascent and the movement toward a next Sat Yuga. Um, and there's far greater elaboration of this in the book, but it certainly does match the feeling I've had ever since becoming aware of what the turning of the ages phenomena actually was back in the 1980s. Why our school is called it, you know, the turning of the ages mystery school. And so great you put up that quote about the seeds, you know, because we love Rajar's understanding of it, you know, creating seed people for what's to come. Um, the annihilation thing shouldn't be something that would bring fear, particularly if you have a connection to heart and soul. Even Steiner said that he saw at this time period in the 2020s, saying that the world would have to be destroyed in order for it to resurrect, you know, and so apparently this has happened a number of times. The other thing that is important to know is that it's only in more recent times that they've had this so-called myth of progress, as if we're linearly getting better and better or more evolved and so on. Oh my God, no. And in fact, there's all kinds of research in this book. You can put up that graph that you had put together for this part of our conversation.
The
The
your
cranial.
oh yeah.
I mean, it's been well known for those that have researched what's happened in the last 5,000 years that it seems that things have degraded. I mean, from the time of the Great Pyramid to the latter pyramids, the complexity of the original languages, and now it's actually been degraded to uh, text language, I guess we could say, that the older hunter-gatherer languages that still remain on the planet are far more complex than the current languages. But then also this is research that according to what is presented in this book, is that it's sort of it's an inside secret amongst those that have been researching this. They don't want to actually reveal or make it known what they've discovered, which is that the cranial volume has decreased during the descending yugas. Um, in fact, this is only showing it back to the cranial capacity of Cro-Magnons. But if you can actually take it back even to a previous golden age, we now know from the research that the Neanderthal skull capacity was bigger than modern humans. Plus, also in this book, it's describing how the ages have decreased, and ages, you know, the average age of humans, but also the height of individuals have decreased from the cycles further back. A lot of this material is not actually presented because it actually goes against the scientism mainstream that makes us believe that somehow here in our technological times we're more advanced than we've ever been. And actually, he openly states in this book, and I totally agree with him, our current technology, the digitalization of everything, and the metaverse and the satellites, and you know the all of that will not survive the conflagration that is coming. That it's essential in order to restore the earth to its um, uh, prime earth healthiness, you know, so that it's natural for these things to happen. And so the cycles of history, the greater majority of the ancient humanity saw cycles as being important, not linear progress, you know, which is the current spell or brainwash that people have been led to believe when they go to ordinary education. Um, so if we go back now to having a little bit of a speculation on, so what happens next? Um, it would, his view is that it's not so much that something absolutely incredibly dramatic happens in March of next year, although that's always possible. In fact, if you just look at the regular astrology, you know, the lineup of things happening, what all the other things that are happening next year with the outer planets moving into new signs, and many of the other things that have been discussed in the school could very well be, particularly in the United States, major stuff going to go down. But his view actually is more likely that it's going to take period of time for these way more dramatic things to happen. And he puts a lot of attention on the Taurid meteor stream. A lot of stuff in there about that. When in the time period between 2032 and 2036 is where the Earth enters into the main portion of that stream. And he's suggesting at these other time periods, the transition time periods in between yugas, that a similar thing happened, and those were somewhat responsible for the earth changes that happened at that time, or the disappearance, the Dark Age time period in Egypt, to the time period in the Mediterranean. Before that, the Noah's flood, other time periods since the Younger Dryas time frame. Um, and then, as I mentioned before, he goes through the different 26 different cometary strikes that were in this one a document that he found in India that happened during the 1200-year time period of the Younger Dryas. So what could be happening here is really a planetary wipeout of the materialistic civilization, which was described by the seers 2,000 years ago, what happens at the bottoming out of Kali Yuga. But then it's the slow ascent. But then during this 1,200-year time period could also include something very similar to what in biblical uh, uh, prophecy is the 1,000 years of peace that happens after, you know, the second coming, however you want to view that. You know, he's not perceiving it as like, oh, the reincarnation of Jesus or something, but rather as the coming of these comets, or these other scenarios we'll get to here before we wrap up today, of another view of what could be actually the mechanism behind the four horsemen of the apocalypse, or whatever, you know, the different things that happen that actually rain down the mechanisms through which conflagrations and deluges happen. Um, Certainly one of the main points of his book, and this is not the only book that does it, is showing the similarity of the same stories throughout the world. You know, even in more recent times, that book by Barbara Hand Clow called Catastrophobia, um, which is the deep hidden inside memories of when human beings went through this before, and we hold that in our deeper DNA. You know, the memories of when that happened, um, and that it can happen again in cycles of history. You know, so it's so it seems that I'm getting from reading this book, and see what you all think when you read it and take it in, um, that it seems to also be describing what we've described in the school here, kind of a bifurcation. There's individuals who are using spiritual will to to access our spiritual selves, our souls, our spirits, our hearts, who will be the seed people to carry it forward one way or another, whether it's you know, leaving for a while and then coming back after a couple hundred years, right? You know, when there's more pockets of ascent happening, You know, as we would go into the ascent of another silver age, and then the ascent of the different ages going up to another Sat Yuga. But I think none of us really knows about this, other than the fact that we're at that point. Every sign and symbol is showing that time is here now, whether it's this year, next year, or whether it's 2032, 2036. Um, Certainly the powers that shouldn't be are aware that something like this is going on, you know. So we need to be aware of this and do deeper dives into this, as what is one of the explorations and inquiries of our school, which is that question: who are we, and what the hell happened? You know. So um, there is an alternative view of the mechanism, and that is Robert Schoch's view. And we've added to our presentation here some few slides about that, but also a link to his work. Um, his view is not that it wasn't comets, but it was plasma strikes, you know, based on solar cycles. And actually, there's a number of books you can see, including his own research, where you can actually interpret the petroglyphs as being comets or as being balls of plasma that come down and melt the ice, ignite the earth, you know, cause everything to burn up, and then freeze up, you know. Or also describing how both cometary, but then also suggesting by Schoch's work, plasma could do the same thing. You know, then you basically have massive rains that happen also, including why you could not go back and reseed, you know, megalithic structures in Egypt until after the wet season ended there. You know, all of that has gone into it in this particular book. Go back to that one before, and you can, which I think is, there's a lot of diagrams like this in the book, but this we wanted to
Oh,
share with this
this
one.
one?
No, the one that shows the comet, the riding
Oh,
horse.
Maya, yes.
The Kalki avatar that comes at the conflagration or at the deluge, right? You know, but is that he talks about how many times these major comets can look like with two streams, or even as many as six streams coming off of them. He made a very interesting point in the book that the last 200 years have not seen major comets, not compared to what humans had seen before, where you'd have comets during the day that lasted for months, you know, and making a distinction between the way that the comets or meteors would look like in the summer Taurids compared to the winter Taurids, which was, I thought, you know, very, very interesting. And so you can then superimpose, you can project onto what you see in the sky different stories, like riding a horse with a sword, you know, as the comet coming in, or the plasma balls coming in, however you want to look at that. I've tended more recently to favor Schoch's view on it. However, I must admit, and I think we were discussing this, Silvianne, before starting, that he makes a very, very compelling case for it being the Taurid meteor area, the area of the solar system that the Earth goes through on a frequent basis, but only lines up with it only certain times, coming up the next time being 2032 and 2036. I thought it was
Right. It
very
lines up
compelling.
with that particular swarm that's
Yes,
in
yes,
it.
that
Right.
portion of it, of the stream.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also has some very provocative ideas about where is the location of Shambhala.
Yeah.
And he even goes so far to suggest that it might exist on portions of the Taurid meteor stream, which is really interesting because where the Taurids show up is right where the Pleiades are. And so all the stories about having come down from, an origin place being the Pleiades, well, they exist right behind the Taurids, where the Taurids are, interestingly enough. Just interesting speculation on that. Another thing that I really learned a lot in reading this book, and one of the things, and more recently, and by the way, this is an announcement also that the refilming of our cosmology course is finished. We're just waiting for the editing to be done, and it will be released soon. But in the process of doing that with Gemini Brett, which was so much fun, we discussed the issue of what is it that is the cause of the precessional cycle. And Bibu in this book goes through the two most accepted stories, views of it. One is the mainstream one, and he debunks that about the mainstream one isn't possible. He also talks about the one a lot of other people follow, which is Crittenden's view, that there's a second sun, but he also shows that as not being credible. And very, very good arguments about it. And I agree with his view on both, discrediting both of those. I never bought into Crittenden's view on it. But then his view, which is really intriguing, is that the solar system itself is rotating. And it's the rotation over 26,000 years that is responsible for the phenomena of precession. And that solution solves the different problems that crop up when you try to look at the mainstream view or even Crittenden's view. It solves it, actually. There is no, quote, proof of that at the moment, right? But it elegantly solves it in ways which I thought were quite profound.
And and one thing for me that was so convincing about that is, yeah, I mean, we're revolving, the moon's revolving around us, we're revolving around the sun, and then we know that we're revolving around the center of the Milky Way. And so why wouldn't the solar system
Right.
be revolving? And that it's really, if you think of it, he had that beautiful schematic of it. It's really, we think of it as a disk, but really in some ways the solar system is a sphere.
Yeah.
And if you look, because of the Oort cloud, and so it looks just like the Earth in its mantle. So again, that,
As
as
above,
above,
so
so below.
below, the practical, the holographic nature of the as above, so below, yeah. It's definitely worth your time and attention to look at it, and you'll understand way more about why we keep discussing these subjects. But just to be very clear with you all, my own views on this keep evolving as new information comes in, and no dogma on this, but rather a way of expanding our awareness of the times that we're in. And maybe it's a way of, kind of summarizing this or wrapping this up. Questions always come up, like how to navigate this, and I've kind of alluded to this, is that the three worlds approach is what I think works best. That on one level, all is well, the universe is unfolding exactly as it's intended to. Great mystery is in command, is in charge, regardless of what it might feel like at various times. Um, so that's the celestial view. And there's a certain surrender to that, surrender to the fact that she is running the show, right? That one woman, that the cosmic womb of the universe, um, which is animated by love, the power and the strength of love, Ananda. And then also there's the underworld, which is basically annihilation can happen at any point. It's natural for things to be composted at various points, and then out of compost comes new life. Um, it can't be attached to our physical existence. That's we could say the hubris of materialism, and then the desire to not ever go through death and to upload your consciousness into a digital chip in the metaverse. I mean, what a ultimate materialistic hubris that is. And then there's the middle world, which is the willingness to look at, what's actually happening, what is really possible in the middle world. That I mean, I always go back to Buckminster Fuller, who would say we could make the world work for everyone if we had the intention to do it. And then to look at the honesty of it, the plastic in the ocean, the geoengineering, the manipulation of the DNA, CRISPR, all the rest of it, humans wanting to become God, rather than trusting that there is a God there's a divine design, shall we say, and human beings are human 1.0 is designed to connect with that. We are part of that divine design. We don't have to alter it or change it or turn it into some hybrid with AI, which to me goes against the naturalness of what a human being's heart and spirit and soul can be. And free will is a large part of that. I mean, free will, our free will can choose to align with soul and spirit and heart, or we can be spelled and just say, okay, we can't do anything about this. This is evolution, this is progress. And that's not what the seers have said. They basically said this is the final descent into the most materialistic time period that could ever happen. And change is coming. Change is already happening, and many of us are aware of it.
Yeah, I really felt profoundly liberated by reading this book. I read it just before we had the Ohio event, and I was telling everybody about it. In that overall story, or all those things you just said, I already had that sense, right? But it made it so visceral to feel these cycles and the inevitability of them and the purpose of them, that I realized I could rest into it, that it doesn't mean that I don't want to do something, with my Aries, all my Aries and my Pisces, but that the cycles are going to happen and they're inevitable, and that there always is a renewal. And so in the meantime, to really realize that I could let go of that part of myself that thought, I'm responsible for changing it all. No, I'm just responsible for being here in this moment in time that we all signed up to be
Yeah.
here, seed people, and it's beautiful, and the winter is coming. I keep thinking of, winter is coming. But there's always a spring.
Right, right. And so yes, we could celebrate actually the end of the Kali Yuga. Um, so also to not forget, particularly at this time period when Venus is in the underworld, to also grieve. Grieve what is it that what has been the uh, fate of the earth in Kali Yuga. I'm reminded of something I learned from another spiritual teacher, that also from India, they have this one, I mean, there's different versions of this in different parts of India, but it's this dance of Shiva and Shakti, where on one, if you look at Shakti on one level, she is the earth mother, she's the feminine Gaia earth mother, and Shiva as the force of creation and destruction. They have a deal with each other. And this is a story they tell in India. Their deal is that she says, when I can no longer enjoy being who I am, then it's your job to destroy it, so that I can then be who I actually am, which is the earth in her in the sacred feminine, in her glory, in her fecundity, in her happiness. And so it's a deal the two of them have with each other. So Shiva in his destroyer and creator aspect has that deal with Shakti, that could happen. And I think that is really what the teaching of the yugas is really about. But it's also the same as the teaching of the precession, the 26,000 year cycle. You have the different time periods where you have the 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 winter season, and then there'll be another spring. You have the four seasons of the great year. And we feel, based on the clues, and this just came from the 1980s, before any about this, the yugas, or we even have the geological history of the sixth mass extinction. I mean, those are even larger cycles. That this was the end and the beginning of the entire 26,000 year cycle. And we proposed the dates of 1962 to 2034. And it's so interesting. It's my wife was mentioning this, and he came and said, well, wait a minute. So the Taurid stream comes through to 2032 to 2036. Well, gee, we're suggesting that the end of the great turning is 2034. It's like 62 to 2034. One degree of the precessional cycle of the 360 degrees. So a lot of correspondences, and we will be revisiting this many times. The convergence of these different timelines, and we hope this conversation has expanded your minds, also made you more curious to take deeper dives into this, and we welcome your feedback and suggestions as we go forward. And meanwhile, this is going to be the last video blog that will I be doing another one? Let's see. This will be the last one until I get back from Europe, because a lot of us are then meeting over there in Europe at Callanish for the lunar standstill. So I probably won't do another one of these until probably August. So pleasure sharing this with you today.
Thank you so much. This is it was actually you had mentioned that first article that by Bivu Dev Misra offhandedly in some talk you were giving that I was listening to, and I went and found it on the internet, and that was like when was that, 2015 or 16 or something.
Yeah.
So this is what's always, I don't know, I always felt so confused about. I knew the timeline we were given wasn't right, but I didn't even have a foothold to get into something different.
Yeah.
And it really is transformational.
I think he's nailed it, and I'm sure he's still doing his research, and he'll probably have updates on it. So, all right, thanks again. Until next time, and it's been our pleasure. Okay.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.